So here with Slate.com's Joel Anderson, also former TCU running back Joel Anderson. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. How you doing? It's good to catch up. I do anything Texas football, man.
I'm doing good. Getting a little bit more sleep than you as a new father. How's that going?
Just coming off of a rough night, but you know what? We can build on this. Every day is opportunity for improvement. And so I tell my son, I was like, hey, man, we didn't have it last night, but maybe tomorrow it'll get better. This gives us something to game plan for and build around.
A little gentler approach than Gary Patterson, I'd assume.
Yeah, man. I mean, Gary might have kicked him out of the room last night, man. But yeah, I like to think of myself as a lot more benevolent leader than Gary was. But I mean, Gary is a lot more successful at doing what he's done that I have so far. So who am I to criticize, right?
Speaking of TCU, I wanted to ask you, coming from Missouri City, what was it about TCU? Why did you pick TCU? And kind of, if you were a recruit in today's climate, what do you think would be different about your recruitment?
Well, I mean, the important thing to remember about the mid '90s, because you were alive then, Mike, I assume,
Yep.
is that is that things were just so different. There wasn't. I didn't actually know a hell of a lot about TCU before they started sending me letters or whatever. So I was kind of a delusional recruit at the time that I kept thinking, oh man, I'm going to get some of these bigger schools to come in. And then I thought, oh well, you know what, I'm going to get maybe Northwestern or UCLA. And I got injured my senior year, so it didn't quite get what I thought I was going to get. So actually, what happened is that I sort of humbled myself, and I was like, well, let's look at some of the schools that are within driving distance, schools I'm familiar with, and some of the programs that I've kind of grown up with. And TCU really jumped up the list, man. I mean, so there was one thing on field. They The year before they had an All-American running back, a guy named Andre Davis, and he was gone. And so they I didn't know anybody on the running back depth chart at that point. And then, strangely enough, I was kind of a nerd in that I actually cared whether or not TCU had an accredited journalism school, and it was one of the few in our region. I always knew that I wanted to. I always say, like, I always knew I either wanted to play in the Super Bowl or cover the Super Bowl. And so I knew that I wanted to go into sports writing if football didn't work out. And so between that, and it was only a 4-hour drive right up I-45. Um, I mean, that pretty much made it a easy call. I think my other options were like, which now known as Texas State, Sam Houston State, and some of the other ones. So TCU was actually one of the bigger offers I had at the time.
When you look back over the 20 years of Gary Patterson's tenure, at TCU, can you even put into context just what he meant for the program? I know it didn't end the way that maybe he
Right.
wanted to, but just where that program was when he took over to where it is now, it's pretty amazing.
I mean, you really can't actually. It's really difficult to put into words what Gary Patterson meant for TCU football. And I mean, the one thing that I always like to say is that Gary Patterson didn't come in as the head coach at TCU. He was a defensive coordinator under Dennis Francione, and I thought the turnaround really started under Coach Francione. Just the emphasis on weightlifting, and it sounds crazy to hear that in 2022 and be like, weightlifting was a real key, but like, I don't know how to articulate how different our workout and weight programs were different just from that year. Pat Sullivan left to the year Dennis Francione came, and that really transformed things. Then what Gary Patterson did to build on the program after Dennis Francione, it's I don't want to say it's unprecedented because I'm sure there is some precedent for it somewhere, but I think that what Gary Patterson did at TCU is one of the miracles of modern day college football. Like, maybe not quite on the level of Bill Snyder in Kansas State, but something along those lines. And that it gave a whole bunch of other schools that have no business trying to be an FBS, competing in FBS, because people looked at what Gary Patterson did at TCU and they said, oh, all I got to do is get the right guy, build the right system around it, and we can have a contender year after year. And it's just not that simple. Like, I mean, man, it makes sense that Gary Patterson has a statue outside of the school right now, because prior to that, I mean, my first year at TCU was in the 16-team Western Athletic Conference, man. Like, we'd been left out of the Big 12, and really were diminished to the minor leagues, and he pulled them up out of that. Like everything that TCU football is today, it's not all because of Gary Patterson, but so much of it is because of Gary Patterson that I don't. I mean, I know things didn't end well, but you just can't get past what that guy. He's. I don't know if there's a number one on a Mount Rushmore, but that dude is it. If such a thing exists.
And then that tenure leaves or tenure ends, and they got to turn the page. They hire
Mm,
Sonny Dykes. What
mm,
were your initial reactions to the Sonny Dykes hiring? And
mm.
are you optimistic or
Mm.
pessimistic about the near future? I know your answer. That's why I'm chuckling as I'm
Yeah,
giving the
right. I
answer.
know. Yeah, you've seen me, man. You say, look, I'm not optimistic. I'm realistic. And TCU has already experienced a once in a lifetime run in the program's history. That's probably not going to happen again, especially in this new college football world. No matter who is the coach. So no matter who is at the top, I think the TCU is going to be in for a reality check. There's going to be some struggling. And okay, so much of the Sonny Dykes choice was built around we're going to make TCU the DFW home team instead of SMU. SMU was the Dallas home team, but now it's TCU, right? And we're going to bring in Reginald Samples, and he's going to revamp our recruiting efforts, and we're going to get guys that we've not had access to, or we've got this recruiting plan. And I mean, Reginald Samples didn't even make it to the summer, man. He's the running backs coach for the LA Rams now. So I assume I know that I'm hoping Coach Dykes has a plan B, and that his game plan and blueprint is durable in spite of that. But that really makes me skeptical. And I mean, the only other thing that I would have to say is that, like, look, Sonny Dykes has had some not bad jobs. I mean, he was at LA Tech. I mean, he was Louisiana Tech. He was at Cal. Obviously, he was at SMU. None of those schools are powers, but they all have ways to win. They all have like something that have made them competitive at some point in my life. Sonny Dykes has never finished better than third. He's only finished better than third in his conference once in 12 years. And I mean, if you're telling me that that's the best that TCU can do, well, all right. I mean, whatever. Good luck. But I have to admit, I wanted Dion, man. I really thought that was the move to go to if we could have got him. But I'll just hold out hope. I'm not, like I said, I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm just realistic. And it's just going to be different now.
The NIL space is becoming such a big topic in college football, such a dominating kind of topic in college football. With TCU being a pretty small private school, there's just not a whole lot of alumni out there. Like, I think Texas Tech has, 40,000 current students, right?
Yeah.
And so
Right.
how does TCU and Fort Worth kind of compete in that space against, some of these other programs with such bigger alumni bases to pull from?
Yeah, it's crazy because I remember when I went there, the '90s. Like TCU is one of the smaller schools in FBS in terms of enrollment and alumni, right? That's why our stadium is 47,000 because there's only so many people we can put in that stadium. So I don't know, Mike. We're not going to be Notre Dame or Stanford because those programs are kind of in their own class. We're not going to be Vanderbilt because who the hell wants to be Vanderbilt? We're obviously not Duke. You know what I mean? And like maybe the comparable programs for TCU, in a manner of speaking, like Boston College, Northwestern, maybe Wake Forest, like schools that are sort of punching out of their weight class, or Miami. And I mean, okay, it's far fetched that TCU could be Miami because of the absence of tradition and mystique. But Miami is a small private school in a fertile recruiting ground, and for years they struggled with resources and facilities and things like that. Like, I mean, they fell behind, and that's why they're probably third in the pecking order of schools in Florida right now. Or actually, that's probably Florida State, but you get what I'm saying. So I think the thing is that TCU just has to play up its strengths. I mean, does not have a huge alumni base, but it is a wealthy private school. Continue to tap into those folks. I mean, I assume oil money has something to do with it. Maybe tech now, I don't know. And just lean into your recruiting ground. I mean, to an extent, Sonny Dykes is right. TCU is the DFW home school in a manner of speaking for major colleges. So you have to sort of lean into those advantages and take advantage of the wealth in that area. And that's easier said than done. Like, I'm just saying it here, but like if TCU was going to be Notre Dame or Stanford, presumably it would have happened already. Like, we would be a national brand. So I know that there's a lot of work to be done in that way, but I think that's what's going to have to happen. And even then, the odds are stacked against you, man. I mean, you're not going to out recruit Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, blah 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 blah. So, you just kind of have to work with what you got and hope it's enough.
You're out in California. Obviously UCLA, USC. Moved to the Big Ten, kind of changed everything from a conference realignment standpoint. Do you think the new Big 12, the new look Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma, can do anything to kind of stay nationally relevant, or are they going to have to just settle for trying to be like the best of the rest?
Man, if we were talking about basketball, I'd be like, hell yeah.
Yeah, basketball's going to be good.
Yeah, the basketball it'd be maybe the best basketball conference in the country, right? But in terms of football, I mean, it's going to be tough if the current roster of schools remains the same. I mean, there's just not enough households or national brands to keep up with the SEC or Big Ten or maybe even the ACC. I mean, I don't know, like what's the premier school left in the league now? Is it Baylor? I mean, is it Oklahoma State? Is it TCU? I don't know.
Might end up being Cincinnati.
Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? Cincinnati, right? Yeah, maybe University of Houston. Who's to say? So I think it would be really difficult if it stays as is. If they could somehow manage to finagle a merger with the Pac-12, maybe. Get in with those or get in those Arizona schools, lure them back, and maybe Colorado or whoever. But as it is right now, in terms of football, I mean, perception drives so much of this anyway, and the perception is that the Big 12 is down bad without Texas and Oklahoma. So that's how. I mean, yeah, man, we got to get a big dog one way or another. We got to link up with some other big dogs, but we're just not doing enough in our own yard.
Speaking of Houston, you're from Missouri City. I know when we were kids, Houston kind of got left out when the Southwest Conference kind of dissolved, and they've been in what they would call football purgatory for a long time. Like how much of a sleeping giant do you think that program is? Like how much does that program matter in that city as somebody who kind of grew up there?
Man, so I'm not going to pretend that it's the University of Texas or Texas A&M in Houston, but U of H does have a diehard fan base. It's got a lot of resources. I think people in Houston have largely good feelings about the campus and the brand and all that other stuff. So, I mean, I think it has tremendous potential. I mean, I hate to bring up Miami as a standard again, but again, you have kind of, a school in a huge recruiting ground. I mean, there's a lot of locals there that you can work with. They've got a lot of resources. I mean, and a couple of boosters, Tillman Fertitta being one of them, that is interested in seeing the program succeed. And so you can look at the facilities on campus, even going back, several years. I mean, U of H has had some pretty decent facilities relative to its standing in FBS. So, I mean, I think that they can make some real hay. Like maybe they could be that premier school in the reconstituted Big 12. I don't know. But there's a reason that the University of Texas is never really interested in playing University of Houston or elevating them into their league, because they know that in some ways it's a sleeping giant. Like maybe that time that it could be, one of the national powers, consistently is over. But it still can do some real damage when it's operating at full speed. And yeah, man, I mean, I'm just really proud of them. Like I grew up a Cougars fan. I rooted for Andre Dwyer and Chuck Weatherspoon, and all those, Manny Hazard and all those guys. And so they've come a long way, man. And I'm glad to see that they're kind of getting a shot back at big time football.
Every time they score a touchdown, I'm still expecting that siren to go off. I have dreams.
Oh man,
I have dreams of that siren. That thing was loud.
Did you go to the games at the Dome, or did you? Or
Oh
did you
yeah,
ever,
yeah. I mean, my parents could drop me off there and give me $20, and I could spend 5 hours of my weekend. It was great.
Oh man, so I might be one of the few people in the world that thought it was appropriate for them to beat SMU 95-21. I was like, hey man, they should have went for 100. So.
You're one of my favorite Twitter followers. I think you have, not only is it informative, but it's hilarious. I know that you like to kind of mess with Texas a little bit with the Texas Longhorns. Does Arch Manning becoming the face of Texas make them even more unlikable to kind of the neutral fan? Like how much does that kind of just fit perfectly with the brand of UT?
No, Mike, let's go ahead. Like seriously, like this is I actually am excited for the potential hilarity here. I mean, look, man, I know that there are high school recruiting experts out there, and far be it for me to argue with them. But one thing that I know about Arch Manning is that he went 7-3 last year in a weak division in Louisiana. And if this is the dude that's supposed to be the next savior for University of Texas football, amazing. I can't wait. I can't wait to see them, take pictures after games, giving that stupid horn signal, while, standing at attention for, the eyes of Texas or whatever. Great. Keep it up. I don't think they're going to be unlikable at all. I think they're going to be a lot of fun, because I just love to see Longhorn fans get their hopes up, man. You know what I mean? It's one of my favorite things in college football, that they still think Vince Young is just right around the corner, man. That they're going to recapture those years, or maybe the R.I.P. Steve Wooster years. You know what I'm saying? That Texas is going to be right there again. But I actually think this is going to set up for some hilarity. And man, if Steve Sarkisian is around for it, even better.
Yeah, we put out these like Texas 12 rankings where we kind of rank, the position groups, and if we don't put Texas in the top 2 or 3, we just get murdered online. And it's like, guys, y'all went 5 and 7. Like, where does this? If I could have the type of bravado of an average Texas fan, I would have so much more confidence in my life.
Oh my God, Mike! I see. This is the thing. Like, I can't wait for them to go to the SEC. Like, I'm like, go ahead, man. Please take your asses on over there. I'm looking forward to seeing you all become Kentucky. You know what I mean? Like, or Tennessee. The 2 UTs can fight it out for who can go 7-5, 8-4 every year. So good for them, man. I think Texas fans get the program they deserve.
Before we let you get out of here, Texas A&M's building a lot of momentum. They signed, what some consider the best recruiting class in the country last year. You look at the preseason polls, and, they're all in the top 10. They're a different program perception-wise than they were a decade ago. Does that change when Texas gets back into the same conference with them? Like, are they allowed to exist on their own, or when Texas gets there, does that kind of eliminate some of that kind of luster, I suppose?
I mean, I definitely think it takes away the conversation piece, right? That every time A&M went into a recruit's home, they could say, well, hey, man, we play big boy football every Saturday, like we'll go to Georgia. We're in the same division with Alabama and LSU. We can, this is a league that NFL scouts are there, and you're playing against future NFL players. And, I mean, do you want to do that, or do you want to spend your weekends playing against Kansas State or Kansas, right? And I mean, we've seen sort of with recruits, how receptive they've been to that message. So I obviously I don't think it's great that Texas is there. But I mean, here's what I would say about A&M. They finished second in the SEC West twice under Jimbo Fisher. And I think if Aggies fans heard that in a vacuum, they'd probably say, that's reasonable. We're in the same division with Alabama and LSU. Like, that's just how it has to be. So I think that A&M is probably going to be okay. Like, I don't think that Texas has to take anything away from them. And I think that there are enough high-level recruits, not only in Texas, but regionally, that they both can, make hay and be competitive. So, I'm sure A&M didn't want Texas in there. Obviously, they didn't. I mean, I think people did the FOIA and saw that A&M actually absolutely didn't want Texas in there. But I don't think it has to slow down whatever's going on now, because, I mean, as it is, their head coach is Jimbo Fisher, and A&M has the resources it has, and University of Texas has Steve Sarkisian, and they've been doing what they've been doing for the past decade. So until that changes, and I think A&M's all right.
I think I agree with you mostly, but Texas A&M fans and reasonable is a tough sell.
That's a fair point. It's so funny. I never, I grew up in Houston, and A&M's right up the street, and I never really had no beat. Growing up, I heard the Aggie jokes and all that good stuff. I was like, man, I thought, A&M was not bad when I was growing up, man. They had Greg Hill and Darren Lewis and Quentin Coriat. They were kind of a cool program. So I don't want them to jump on me. My uncle went there in the late 70s, early 80s. So A&M fans, you fine with me.
All right, sir. Hey, I really appreciate your time. I know it's early out there in California, and you clearly didn't get a lot of sleep last night. So we appreciate it. Maybe try to fit in a nap at some point today.
I'm going to do my best, man. Thanks for having me on, man. It was a lot of fun.